Hi guys. For too long now, the New Zealand government and especially the RBNZ have done everything they could to reward the very people who have been putting the whole financial stability of the nation at risk. The property investors who constantly strive to accumulate more and more properties by taking on more and more debt are the very people who are constantly being protected the most by the government and the RBNZ. We all know the types. They go to seminars where like-minded investors all talk about how many properties they own, how much extra capital gain they have accumulated, and how much extra money they are able to squeeze out of hard-working renters. These people have been getting richer and richer and richer, not by doing anything constructive for New Zealand, but by doing the exact opposite. All they do is take from the New Zealand economy and reinvest their profits back into buying more properties to be able to extract more money from hard-working Kiwis. Unfortunately, if the RBNZ senses that property prices may start dropping, which would affect these risk takers, then the RBNZ have proven to us all time and time again that their first thought is to immediately move to protect the risk takers. Because the RBNZ knows that if these risk takers lose a big chunk of their ill-gotten free capital gains, then this can in turn risk our whole New Zealand banking system. Because these property investing greed merchants have used capital gains in one property to buy another and then another and then another, if house prices drop substantially, they can end up owing more than the properties are worth. And if something happens where the risky borrower can no longer service the debt, then things can unravel very quickly, guys. And the whole banking sector, Ponzi supporting House of Cards, will collapse. Perversely, the RBNZ chooses to constantly protect and reward the very people put on the whole New Zealand financial system in peril. The RBNZ knows that the banks have lent too much to greedy property investors, which is why they slashed interest rates and removed LVR restrictions in a panic during COVID. But the banks keep on doing the risky lending as it means more profits for them if more people take out mortgages. And they've realised that they have got nothing to lose themselves as the RBNZ keeps bailing them out. Or if the stuff really hits the fan, the RBNZ will let the banks do a bail-in, where the banks steal depositors' money to save the banks, who are then able to keep the greed merchant property investors in operation. The RBNZ knows that the New Zealand banking system viability is in question if house prices do seriously crash. They know all of this because they caused it, and yet they still allow so much risky borrowing even today. What sort of responsible regulator is the RBNZ? By constantly being seen to do everything possible to protect the risky borrowers, they're encouraging more people to become risky borrowers. There's no consequence and no risk to the greedy investors if the RBNZ forever saves them. The RBNZ is the problem. So everyone in New Zealand who is not a greedy property investor, who is hoarding properties, needs to ask the government and the RBNZ why they keep on lending more and more and more to these greed merchants, when they know that this is risking the whole New Zealand banking system and is forever putting an artificial floor under house prices, which keeps young first home buyers trapped in renting. The governments and the RBNZ are protecting the worst type of people. The responsible people who work hard and try to save money are the ones who are getting left behind. They do not benefit from the RBNZ's constant asset appreciation drive, where they keep on loosening the monetary policy to try and get assets to rise again. In fact, the constant lowering of rates to reignite the Ponzi penalises everyone as it is a driver of inflation. It also penalises responsible savers because they get less interest from their savings. And even worse, their money is at risk if the banks do default due to risky lending to risk-taking parasites. You could not make it up. The government and the RBNZ have got it all wrong. They're risking everything just to keep lending to the wealthy risk-takers to keep inflating the Ponzi. It's well past time that this whole debacle stopped, guys. Now the RBNZ have finally done a little thing to help things a little bit. They have finally introduced debt-to-income restrictions in 2024, but they are still far too loose. They are set up around the current overpriced housing market and should in fact be set at a level that lessens risk, which would also bring down house prices, which is the responsible thing for a banking regulator to do. The new DTI rules would allow banks to lend 80% of owner-occupier lending to borrowers with a DTI ratio less than 6, 20% of owner-occupied lending to borrowers with a DTI ratio greater than 6, 80% of investor loans to investors with a DTI ratio less than 7, 20% of investor loans to investors with a DTI ratio greater than 7. So for example, imagine John and Carol want to buy a house in Hamilton. John earns $70,000 salary before tax, and Carol earns $65,000 salary before tax. Their gross, which is before tax income, is $135,000. Now John has got a student loan of $20,000 and an outstanding $2,000 car loan, and Carol owes $5,000 on her credit card. So their total debt is $27,000. Now let's say that this pair want to borrow $800,000, which is somehow normal now for an old crusty house in Hamilton. Now the DTI ratio would be debt divided by income, which would be $27,000 plus $800,000 divided by $135,000, which equals a ratio of 6.13. Now because this DTI is greater than 6, and we know 20% of owner-occupier lending by a bank can be to borrowers with a DTI ratio greater than 6, if the bank has not used up its 20% quota, it could lend $800,000 to poor John and Carol, who may be about to take up a lifetime of debt servitude for a mouldy shack in Hamilton. But this is what the RBNZ have intentionally created. Historically, a DTI of 3 times was regarded as normal in the real world, and that was for a single wage earner. But little old New Zealand has allowed its housing market to get so far out of whack with reality that somehow 6 times a couple's combined pay is considered normal for buying a house. Now the only reason that this insanity has occurred and people have to take on so much debt just to have a roof over their heads, guys, is because the risky borrowers pushed up house prices, competing with each other for who can buy more houses to be able to suck up more working people's wages via rent. The sooner a government finally gets in and decides to take a more prudent and responsible standpoint regarding the economy and decides to just not keep on protecting and rewarding the rich house collectors, the better. New Zealand could and should be a successful country for everyone and not just rich asset owners. But it will take a government getting in whose first priority is not to give billions of dollars in tax breaks to landlords like Luxon and is merry-mended as soon as they got in. Now it will also take an RBNZ whose employees' priority is not protecting their banking industry friends' interests before the general public's interests. Have you ever noticed how many ex-RBNZ employees walk straight into very highly paid private bank jobs when they decide to leave the RBNZ? Funny that, isn't it? So yes guys, the whole system has to change, and it can only change if we get people at the top who are able to think differently from the same destructive ways of thinking that has been prevalent in New Zealand for years. The unelected RBNZ needs major reform. It is the root cause of inequality in New Zealand, and please don't forget that these are unelected individuals who are wrecking the country. No, it's just not good enough. They are even dropping rates again now to try and rekindle a Ponzi. I'm sorry, but if they can't do what's best for all Kiwis and not just rich Kiwis, then it's time to sack the lot of them. It was clear from day one that Luxon is not capable of change. And unfortunately, Chippy is so tarnished by his previous boss's actions that he will never be able to wash that stain off. Now, I believe that New Zealand cannot prosper under the type of leader who is incapable of envisioning a successful economy that is not built around a property Ponzi. I believe that New Zealand could do so much better. Just imagine if the cost of housing was much less. Imagine what a boost this would be for the economy. Renters and first-time buyers who are actually able to buy cheaper properties would finally have spare money to spend in the New Zealand economy. You know, like doing fun things like taking the kids to amusement parks or going out for meals. People would finally have money to spend in the shops again, and all the dying towns with boarded up shops could finally come back to life. It's obvious to me that the Ponzi is like a cancer that has been spreading slowly across the country, sucking up all of the goodness and the fun that people could once afford. It reminds me of one of those movies where an ugly old witch sucks all of the youth out of a beautiful young woman, so the old witch can try and be young again and have a bit more fun herself. That's just what the RBNZ sponsored Ponzi is doing. It's taking the enjoyment out of the lives of the young and handing it to the older, richer investors so they can have a bit more fun. This is why so many young people are leaving. Incredibly, a lot of the investors cannot even see that they are part of the problem. Their entitlement is off the charts, but the RBNZ has always looked after them, and it's all they have ever known. They don't realise that it should not be the young person's responsibility to pay for the older investors' foreign cruises or brand new Mercedes. The positives of lowering housing costs far outweigh any of the positives of a few asset owners feeling wealthy enough to buy more assets. The Ponzi is slowly destroying New Zealand, and if it is left to continue, then say goodbye to not just this generation, but every generation in the future. They'll all leave. So guys, let me know what you think, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all on the next one. Cheers for that.